Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Crash Couch. I'm your host, Chris, and today we have almost everyone available. We have Joel. Joel, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much.
And returning finally is Ian. Ian, how are you?
Hello, I am good. Crazy snow day in Washington when we're having a good time.
And Ernie is here as well. Ernie, how are you?
Doing well, and compared to Ian, I'm bringing the 70-degree weather with me. So
we're here to discuss the finale of Season 5 of the Expanse Nemesis games, affectionately titled after the book. And I don't have a whole lot to intro. I do want to say that we passed 1,000 followers on our Twitter, which is pretty cool. Never really thought that we would ever get to that number. I was happy when we had 100 followers back in the day. So it's pretty neat. I'm actually going to be doing a giveaway at some point here soon. I don't know if it'll be before or after this episode goes up. So it may have already happened after you hear this, but by chance it hasn't, go to our Twitter and get more details on that.
I'm guessing because I'm a part of this crew, I don't qualify to win anything.
No, unfortunately not. I'm sorry, Ian. I mean, you could create a burner account, and if you would win, then I guess you could, fake your name and
just
whatnot,
live a lie for the rest of my life.
Yeah. But yeah, let's just go ahead and get into it. I have very weird feelings about this finale, but I don't want to go first. So I'm going to call on Ian to go first because he has been away from the show for the longest.
I will do my best as the professional editor of this podcast to edit my kids out. I usually try to get away from the house when we record, but they're here. They're at the house, so they're just an active participant.
Before we get into the discussing this episode, why don't you tell us about how you felt about the previous episode, since you've not really been on too much this season?
Yeah, this season has been really good. It's felt like so serious. I think it's like the most serious or like heavy season of the show so far. I feel, for whatever reason, I feel very like emotionally connected to Naomi and Marco and the family dynamic and like the heartbreak that's there. And so like in the episode where Naomi and I read Nemesis games twice. It's the only one of the books I've read twice because I accidentally ordered it a second time after a year after I read it, thinking, oh yeah, that's right, I need this book. And I got it and realized, oh, I already read this. I'm an idiot. And I read it again. And so the emotional toll that the book kind of put me through with just that family dynamic, seeing it played out on screen was crazy. I found myself crying when Naomi jumped out of the ship, which was really weird. My wife looked over at me and she goes, "Are you crying?" And I was like, what? And she started laughing at me. Yeah, I think it's been a very good season so far, but again, very emotionally tolling on me, which is kind of weird.
Yeah, I think that's fair. What do you think about this episode just in general?
I really enjoyed this episode. A lot happened, especially the last 15 minutes. I have only read through Babylon's Ashes, so I have no idea what the end was about, what that ship thing in the credits was that started glowing blue towards the end there. Obviously Alex's death, which was written into the show. I knew it was coming. I don't know, I guess I don't know how they would have done it otherwise, but it definitely kind of came out of left field and was like, oh, okay. And then just kind of move on. I didn't really feel anything there when I thought I would have, because I liked the character. So that kind of was a bummer, I guess. I loved Bobby saving Naomi. That whole scene was incredible. We'll get into the rest, but I really like this episode.
Yeah, I think the best way to really tackle this episode is everything prior to Naomi getting rescued, and then really everything after, or pretty much when they have the, for lack of a better word, the celebration on Luna. I think that's probably the way to that's kind of the cutting off point for this. So let's just try to tackle the first half of the episode first, and then getting into everything after, in the third act of the episode, pretty much from Alex's death onward. Because I think that itself is possibility for interesting discussion. So I think that it was a fitting conclusion to a season that was just kind of like there. I don't think it was a bad season. I don't think it was the best season. I don't know if it was the worst. It's just kind of there. It's almost like it's just I hate using the word filler because it does not feel that way. But it's just, I don't know. I'm having a difficult time trying to describe the way that I felt about everything.
I don't disagree with that take. I like this season a lot, but it did feel, this is so weird coming from me based on what I just said. I felt an emotional connection to the story of Naomi and Philip and Marco, but I didn't feel much of an emotional connection to everything else that was happening.
Yeah.
So I definitely feel where you're coming from there.
I think that it felt a little disjointed at times because, we're used to not really fast-paced story, but just something that it doesn't just drag on and on and on. And that's not a negative thing to say it's just dragging on, because I personally think that what we saw with Naomi's story and really everything involving Marco and Philip, plus Amos and Clarissa Peaches was, I think that's some of the best stuff that we've seen in the entire show. Where I felt like it dragged down a little bit, and this episode sort of just, I don't know, put the cherry on top of the cake, was it concluded that stuff, but like it really didn't allow for anything else to happen, with the exception of maybe Drummer and her crew. Like that was exciting to see, but I don't know, it felt fitting, and it was probably one of the better episodes of the whole season. But it's just, without knowing what's coming in the future, it's a little difficult. Like, again, as someone that's not read the books, it's a little difficult to hype myself up for that. Like last season, we saw that Marco was going to attack Earth, and we knew who he was. We knew his relation to the characters. There was this great cliffhanger. And then this season, we get a pretty cool cliffhanger for people that have read the books. But otherwise, I was like, the last 5 minutes, I was just completely lost as to what was going on. And again, that's probably partially my fault for maybe not paying attention fully. But I just think it was a season full of setup, and I don't know how much it'll be or how much was paid off just yet. I think we have to wait until season 6 to really fully appreciate the season.
Yeah, Chris, I think you're right. I think if you read the books, it will form your reactions to this. I think that's absolutely true. And I know you have not read the books, and I don't think many other people on this podcast have read all the books, but there's a lot of good stuff happening. And finally, we get into some of the meat and potatoes of the storyline. And it's just going to rock in season 6, I can tell you. And quite frankly, and I was trying to say this earlier in this podcast, the most tragic thing I think about season 5 is that bottle of tequila. My God, how sad is that?
Little help.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, Joel, because I just thought it was so funny that we had just recorded that night. You had mentioned what happened to the tequila, and I was like, oh, it's not going to, be brought up again. And then I watched the episode, and when that happened, I couldn't. But
it's a setup. You mentioned season 5, it's all a bunch of setups, and some of the storylines were resolved, but in a very quick way. Yeah, that's partly true. I just found season 5 to be good. I thought it started very, very well, and then the whole Naomi conflict just didn't really grab me all that much. But I like how this episode, the last episode of season 5, really did address this notion of space, the expanse. Not only in space, i.e., Naomi taking a header out of the spacecraft in order to escape, right, in a rickety old spacesuit, and is just floating in space by herself as a way to try to survive. Just the awesome visual of that, both like just through our empirical senses, but just on a philosophical level, being lost in space. There's that, and also the fact that space is a big place and you don't know what's happening everywhere. And we get this through the political intrigue with the free Navy in cahoots with a certain segment of the Martians. And then we get the whole gate. What's happening? The last 3, scenes that took place over like that like 3 nanoseconds at the end of this episode. Really, there's like 3 different acts within the last 10 minutes of this episode. And that's just astounded me because, my God, yes, this is happening. This is happening. And I have a better understanding what's happening because I read the books. But it's a sense of, this doesn't make sense. Or what, WDTF. Something's happening. And I want to know more because it's not good. There's a sense of dread. We're back into science fiction now. That is something I can appreciate.
I think I agree with everybody here too. I immediately sent a text to Chris about how I felt about the episode, and then I started watching a bunch of reviews about the season finale and how they felt about it. And it seems to be the consensus around that the people that read the books are really excited about how the show, the last few minutes, happened, and what it's the stepping stones for the next season and what that will bring. And I think for somebody like Chris and I who haven't read the books, it was more of like intriguing, but it didn't grab us as much. I'm comparing everything to the season finale of season 3, though, because that for me was the strongest season finale of The Expanse. So I there was great moments in this episode, and I think about 3/4 of it. If that's fair enough to say. I didn't like the celebration on Luna and what was happening there. It felt very forced, if I'm being honest. But one of the things I did love about this episode, and I love this aspect about it, was the actual battle itself. The reason why I liked it is because I actually had to go back and rewatch what was actually happening. And that's the thing that with movies that they do, I like to compare a lot of stuff to World War II. But a lot of World War II movies, they'll paint the German planes with like a streak of red or something, just so you know who the bad guy is. And everything was so quick and what was happening that I had to go back and rewatch to make sure everything that I saw was actually what happened. Because it was very quick, and the thing is, they didn't paint the red streak on the Free Navy ships or anything like that. I had to go back and actually just kind of sit back and enjoy it and understand what was going on. And I do think that the camera work in this episode was probably my favorite of the whole season. So, I mean, that's just kind of my thoughts. And I think I like to sum up this episode with the line that Drummer said, Captain now, Kamina later. So everything kind of just happened in the beginning, and then Kamina was later.
For the folks who haven't read the books, what do you think happened when that Martian ship went through the gates and got, eaten? Let's just use that verb, eaten by whatever. I thought the visual itself was just amazing because it just turned into almost like animation. What do you think is happening there, guys?
I thought it was like some kind of like disintegration, but I could very, very well be wrong.
Yeah, I thought it was a disintegration, but also an absorption of whatever energy that was. That was my interpretation.
Yeah.
Right.
I think, if I remember correctly, actually, that starts happening in Babylon's Ashes, because I wasn't shocked when that happened, and I feel like I read about it, so maybe yeah, I think it happens in Babylon's Ashes, but and that's as far as I've read. The visuals of it were not blue, right? So I don't think it was a protomolecule. And it reminded me of the end of last season when Dr. Okoye goes into that, whatever the center of that blobbing mass on Illis. It reminded me of that. So I think it has to do not with the protomolecule, but some kind of conflict with the protomolecule.
Yeah. The books haven't actually fleshed this out. We're all waiting for book 9 to drop to answer some of these larger questions. But it's like the big baddie has arrived at the scene. Finally. Thank God, that entity that killed or at least defeated the protomolecule makers. Now we're seeing some real conflict, which is greater than humanity is.
I'm scared.
Oh, and it's just, yeah, be scared. We all should be, just so scared that we should like hide under our beds right now. That's great. To me, I can't wait until we raise the stakes even more.
Yeah, that's crazy to think that they can be raised even higher than they already are.
So, what did everyone think of the conclusion to the Naomi storyline? Personally, I was honestly expecting her to die, and that was really the first time that I'd felt that all season. Like I always, kind of expected that she would, or that like they would keep her alive, and it was just going to be like a tease type of thing. I never thought she was ever going to be in danger until this episode. I got that feeling when she jumped out of the ship into space, like with no oxygen except what was in her suit. Like I had that dread that, oh man, like they're going to get her, but she's not going to make it, or she's going to have some kind of, like brain damage or something due to lack of air. But otherwise, I thought that it was probably the best thing that I've really seen in this show, or one of the best things, just the way that it was shot. They actually put out a behind the scenes video of them like testing the rig that they made to film that, which they put like a green screen like to the left side of her face for like the space part, and then moved the rig around while also like turning her in the air and just had like a camera there. And the way it was like just right at her face, and the way that they did that was so interesting to watch, like the behind the scenes. But I think it came off so well done, and it was so realistic, and I loved everything about that.
I think one of the most underappreciated moments in that scene too was the sound design, especially when Bobby bumps into her, and how it's very muted and it sounds like it's coming from a wall. And God, that moment was incredible. So incredible. I'm getting chills just thinking about it.
I thought the CGI was excellent.
Touche.
Good one, Joel.
Yeah.
Anytime.
I agree with both of you. I think that shot was so cool, of just the spinning and that feeling of being completely alone, really summing up the Expanse, like seeing it all before you like that. And again, yeah, the sound design was so good. I really, really appreciate the sound design team on this whole season.
I know that Dominique put on her Instagram, I think it was either today or yesterday, she posted one of those screen to or book to screen things that they've been doing this season, where they will show the scene and then write out like the text from the book as it happens. And I think that they adapted that very well based on the text that they showed. I think it was just wonderful. That whole, like, that was the way to really end her story. Cause I didn't think, like, I never really thought that she would just jump out. I just thought that the ship was going to blow up or something, and she wasn't going to be able to get her call off in time. And that's how they were going to get rid of Alex, and that they would have to sacrifice Bobby for that. But yeah, I just loved the way that everything, it was so shocking. Like we already know that she was out in space and survived that. And like, you can just imagine the anxiety and the dread that she has, like knowing that she has to do something very similar again. And like, technically this is a little safer because, she has a suit on, even if it doesn't have like an oxygen tank. But it just like makes your heart stop watching it unfold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it totally does. And then when Naomi and Holden are reunited, that whole scene was kind of heartwarming. Obviously, it was good to see them both together again. And one thing that's interesting is in the post-show kind of interviews that they do on Amazon, Noreen Shankar said that the message from Naomi to Holden that he refused to read or listen to was actually inspired by Noreen's wife, who had cancer, went into a surgery to get it removed, and he found a Word doc on her computer that was in case this doesn't work. And he said he refused to read it. And so the whole kind of inspiration for that scene came from his own life, which I thought was really cool.
Gives a lot of power to that scene because it was already incredibly moving. Yep. But man, just the little personal touches like that, I think I'm glad that the fandom is so involved that these little podcast shows that they do are very intriguing for the fans.
Yeah, I think that it's the little things like that really just makes this show special. Even in episodes, or a lot of people have been saying that a season has also been a little on the downside. Even when you have instances where that may be the case, there's still moments that you're just like, man, I just love this show. And that's really how I felt like after finishing the finale. I immediately thought, man, I really, really want to go read the books. And like, I know that if I would read them, that I would just like devour them and want to read beyond. And, you know, I don't want to force myself to do that. So I've made it this long. I'll start, even if they do make something like a movie or whatever with the later books, I will probably start after the final proper season of the show. But yeah, I think it's just like little things like that, you know, get put in, or that has those little details that really just makes everything stand out, even in moments of what some would classify as weakness. So we've kind of maybe been dancing around this. So Alex died, and that was.
It's oh man.
Yeah, so that was like a shock really to everyone. Well, it was a shock because we knew that obviously Cass isn't going to be on the season in season 6, so we knew that something was going to happen. Either they were going to write him off or recast, or he was going to die. This did not happen in the books. This is a very difficult subject, so I want to make sure we treat it with care. I think it's safe to say, again, like we established in the first episode of discussing the season, that, you know, we obviously disagree with what Cass did, and we fully support everybody that was affected by it, and we support him being off the show. That being said, do we all agree or disagree that killing him off was the best choice? Because I think that it's, for the show and for the character, it's probably the best choice, because even though it leaves a little bit of a legacy stain for the character itself, you still have him in the book. So, you know, like you can't completely say that his legacy was tarnished or ruined because of the foolish actions of the person that portrayed them. But I do think this was the best choice. Now, the execution of it is, and I know that it was rushed, and that's probably why the last few minutes of the episode feel weird, is because of that. But I do think it was the right choice. I just am not sure if it was done in the best way. I'm curious what you guys have to say about that.
100% agree with you, Chris. I think it was the best decision to kill off Alex, because I think it would have been more of a hindrance for the next season to see his face and have him as involved, especially being the pilot, you know. Now I know with this season it was a little different because he had his own mission to do, and he was separate from the crew. But this was the best decision just because for the show to be still in a positive light, it needed to happen, because we don't agree with what was used or how he abused his status and his power basically as an actor. However, I do feel like it was so unnatural the way it happened that it was very distracting for me to enjoy the episode. And that was something I texted to you right away. It did feel rushed, and it, I jokingly said that it reminded me of the episode of The Simpsons where they kill off Poochie, the character that Homer voiced as a cartoon character that everybody hated. And it reminded me of that because it was just so rushed, and it didn't feel natural. You know, I do feel like they could have come up with a better way to close out the story. And I do agree, though, too, that I think that it's a very difficult task to do. How do you maintain the legacy of the book character and the character that we know and love, Alex, versus the guy who's playing Alex? Because now we see Cass as Alex, you know, and that's very, very hard to do. So it's not like that I blame the writers about it, because what they had to do was incredibly difficult, but it was very distracting for me.
My take on this is that I disagree with you guys to a certain extent. I agree that, the character had to be killed off because of the actors, what he did in real life. And it probably happened in post-production. So they probably had a still shot of him. And how do you actually kill a character off when you can't do reshoots, right? I'm just speculating because I don't know what's in the contract. But it's, they probably were very limited on how to kill the character off because of real life issues in terms of legalities and contracts.
Yeah, I had that same thought, because before we went into this, I was like, well, what am I going to say about this whole scene? And the one was, they show him and he's just perfectly still and dead in space. And I think you're right. I think they had to kind of animate a still shot. And, and the rest of the actors came in, to film all their parts after the fact. So props to the visual effects team, I guess. Yeah.
And there's also the fact that there's precedent in the books. My hero, Fred Johnson, he died, but because he broke out, right? Because of the hazards of space travel, especially when you're doing high G maneuvers.
Yeah, and I completely forgot that that's how Fred died, which is funny considering I read this book twice. It was interesting that they still kind of show that, they talk about that being a risk, with high burn, but it never really feels like a risk because it doesn't happen to anybody. And so to actually see it happen was interesting.
Yeah, the closest I think we got to it was when Avasarala almost stroked out with Bobby in the Razorback.
Yeah.
But yeah, it never felt like there was an immediate danger, just more of a reminder of what could happen. So yeah, I agree with you on that.
I do want to point out that there is I don't know if it's still up, but people on Reddit the night of the episode dropping had noticed that the Amazon X-ray feature thing did have a behind the scenes still of Cass as Alex sitting with everyone else at the party on Luna. So it was clear that his death was decided upon in post-production because otherwise, there's no point of him being there.
Right.
And there's apparently also some weirdly edited things in the actual episode that kind of make it seem like they cut the scene right before he pops up in the frame, which, could be another reason why the last bit, again, feels a little off or feels a little forced or rushed. I don't want to sit here and say that it's the fault of the writers or it's the fault of the production crew, because I firmly believe that they did the best with what they could. I just think that regardless, you're going to have a disjointed, wonky kind of ending since you have to do it like that. It's like with Rise of Skywalker, and that was filmed after Carrie Fisher's death, but Last Jedi had already come out or was already finished before Carrie Fisher died. So they couldn't just write her out of Rise of Skywalker with no explanation, or have some weird things. So they had to use CGI footage, which is fine. It was I thought that was handled as best as you could, but it's still going to feel funny and look funny. And while again it was the best decision for the character and to sort of put Cass in the background in the as we move forward with the future of this franchise, then it just feels weird.
Agreed.
I did want to bring up something I mentioned earlier, the line "Captain now, Kamina later." I think it's important to talk about Kamina's story, Drummer's story, and I'm still curious if that's tattoo or eyeliner.
I vote tattoo. I wasn't here last episode, but as I was editing it, I thought clearly it's a tattoo.
It's a tattoo, right? Yeah, that's what I thought. I like the ending of her story because, one of the famous lines that I said in the last episode even was, how much shit do I have to eat before you respect me? This whole episode, I was waiting for Drummer to come out. Drummer's a pit bull, and she needs to be the leader. So to see her kind of put off to the side and kind of maintained or cornered a little bit, I was just waiting for that moment, and it was such an exciting moment when she snuck up and just grabbed the gun. God, that was a really, really cool conclusion for me. I loved it.
Yeah, I absolutely love that when it was finally okay, I was a little bit concerned about Drummer this whole season, but she's still there. So it was really, really cool to see her basically backstab Marco and her own kind of crew, which was crazy.
Because she's the main reason why the Rocinante is still alive, still flying around.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I loved after everything, Drummer pinging the Rossi and just being like, "This is Drummer." I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah, you got to pick your moments, right? Pick your battles. And she waited and waited and waited and then picked her moment. And she knew the consequences of it. She knew she was going to break up her crew. She knows she has a death mark on her and her friends and her family. And ultimately, it's because of Marco. She probably made her decision months ago. Again, pick the moment.
And the Carol death was pretty brutal and very, very believable. Getting hit with a fire extinguisher in the back of the head, and then having to fall forward and totally run into a metal pole. That was just pretty brutal.
Yeah, that's one way to go. It was sad when they all saw Serge thrown out the airlock by Marco as retribution, basically, for what happened. That was a sad moment.
I think Drummer had the most underrated arc of this entire season, and I think by the fans will be very much appreciated, but by just a casual fan or somebody that is just maybe binging the show, I think will be very underrated. She's always had probably some of the more intriguing arcs in previous seasons too, especially I think it would probably be in last season. But I'm just really glad that she's around and that we have her character. And obviously this does not really happen as we know it in the books, from what I've been told. So it's nice that decision that they made early on in the show's production seems to be really paying off.
Yep, completely agree. I realize we haven't talked about but one thing, but before I go to that, it's a different scene. Is there anything you have to say, Joe?
No, I just thought it was sad, but it was going to happen no matter what. It was inevitable.
I realize one of my favorite scenes in the entire episode we haven't talked about, and that was when Amos and Clarissa didn't really sneak. In the books, he sneaks her on a little bit more, but he talks to Holden and is like, "Hey, you owe me one, right?"
Yeah.
And I thought that part was so funny and so well done.
I agree. That was a great scene. And it's kind of like, wait, Amos is using reason and is using like principles that Holden has against him.
Yeah.
It's like, this is great.
And that was a moment too that, you said earlier, Joel, the WTF, you could see the WTF question mark on Holden's face. That was so good.
Wow.
And just to kind of throw in another thing that I felt like was super underrated as far as a storyline goes, I absolutely loved Monica.
Yes.
This whole season,
yes,
she's fantastic. I hope they keep her in the show because she just added so much more. She's the smart, intelligent journalist who is figuring things out because the other guys are more concerned and emotional about what's been happening. But she's the one that's kind of level-headed because she has to think outside of the box and she's not as involved emotionally. Whereas like Holden's thinking about Naomi and Bull's thinking about the death of Fred Johnson and Alex and Bobby are doing different things. She's figuring out the super important things that, hey, that missile they fired, I don't buy it. Like that. I think they fired off the protomolecule. That was her. She figured that out. So
yeah, she's just not a hack. I think there's a redeeming quality to her character arc, right from the previous seasons. She's actually doing her job as a journalist. She's not just trying to sleep with people to get the better story.
Yeah. And I really appreciate the scene between Bull and Holden where they're talking about basically fighting. They're going to their death, basically. And Monica is just staring at them both, like back and forth, realizing she is probably going to die and she can't do anything about it. And just a look on her face of just like, oh my gosh, but without saying a word, It was so good.
And it's really quick also to throw in there the moment between Bull and Holden right before they go into battle, where Bull says the line like, let's get the skinnies. And basically Holden turns into Holden. And, like this is the discussion I've had with you guys that Holden becomes Holden in the moments that he is laser focused and has a goal. And I love his line of leave that skinny shit out of it. Like that was such a Holden moment.
That was really good.
I think that'll be an interesting dynamic because the prediction is that we're going to have Bull essentially replace Alex and take over really the pilot seat. And I hope that Monica stays. Obviously, we're going to have Clarissa on the ship too. So going into season 6, we're going to have a different dynamic on the ship than what we've been used to, than even what probably book readers have been used to as well. But it'll be very interesting just to see how it all plays out.
Yep, I am super excited.
Indeed.
So before we cut off, any last words?
I think the next season, I expect to see more drinking in bars and more unbroken bottles of tequila and other liquors. That's what I want my expectation for season 6 to be.
There you go.
I'm excited for more awesome liquid physics. Like,
Yes.
anytime they were drinking on the moon, I thought it was so cool how they lowered, obviously, the swishiness of the gravity of the liquid. I really appreciated that. And obviously, anytime there's like the scene where they're all drinking water and having a good time, Drummer and her crew. I love space liquid physics.
Yeah. Ernie, any last thoughts?
I want to know what the hell is going to happen next season, because they definitely left you with what the hell is that? You know,
Yep.
I'm guessing it's a ship or something. But this is the one thing I do love about the Expanse. They give you a piece of something that, you know, you look forward to next season. They up the ante, and you know, as Joel said, just strap in, you know, enjoy the ride, because it's going to be a rough one. So.
Yes, make an investment on buying a new crash couch just for the occasion, because, you know, season 6, it's going to be out of this world.
Ooh, is it plush?
All right. Well, that will do it for this episode of the Crash Couch. Finally done with season 5. It feels weird. It feels like we just started yesterday, but I was glad that we're able to get everything recorded in a timely manner this time. We actually covered the finale of the season, so that's a win for us. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can do so at Crash Couch. I am on Twitter at The Curse of Chris. Joel, where are you on Twitter?
I'm on Twitter at Joel_Welch, WELCH. And I also have my own podcast called the Sci-Fi Pubcast, which is a quirky little show where we talk about themes in science fiction and pop culture. So check that out as well.
Ian, where are you at these days?
I'm on the Twitters as Bearded ASMR. And just because I have ASMR in my title doesn't mean that's all I talk about. But it is. I do talk about that a lot. But also a lot of like sound design and anything else that comes to mind.
And the Expanse, right? You
And
tweet
the
about
Expanse.
sometimes.
I do sometimes.
And Ernie, I know you're not on Twitter, but what is your social handle?
It's on MySpace. You can find me.
What's the song on your page?
Yeah, Snow Patrol.
Perfect.
I'm on Instagram at Your Buddy Ernie.
All right, everyone. Well, that will do it for this episode of the Crash Couch. Until next time, take care.